Central to the Christian faith is the New Testament of the Bible. But since Christianity has been around for about 2,000 years, some of the verses may have been taken out of context and misused, which is why today's episode will count down Christianity's top 5 misused Bible verses of the New Testament. And helping us with our countdown today is Christian scholar and author Kenneth Samples, theology professor Mike Gurney, Bible scholar and lecturer Robert Bontrager, and film director and comedian Corey Edwards.
This is almost not top 5 misquoted verses, but top 5 misused verses. You put the pieces together wrong, and you're going to hurt yourself.
Starting off at number 5 for the top 5 misused Bible verses of the New Testament is Mark 11, verse 22. Throwing a mountain into the sea?
Yeah, this is an important passage. It's often cited by Christians. It says, have faith in God, Jesus answered. I tell you the truth, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says will happen, it will be done for him.
I do remember that verse ever since I was a kid because of the visual of a mountain throwing itself into the sea. That blew my mind. I was like, a mountain? I could command a mountain to throw itself into the sea?
The word image of throwing a mountain into the sea has long captured the imagination of generations who have read the Bible. Such a fantastic claim has caused a lot of speculation through the ages.
When you're a little kid and you read that, you immediately go out and try it and yell at rocks in your yard to jump around. It doesn't really work like that. It's not like the Force.
One of the most popular ways that this passage is taught from the pulpit in sermons is that you need to have faith. You need to do something. And if you don't have enough faith, then something's wrong with you. And so the focus is really on us, the person with the faith, the person with the lack of faith.
I don't know, people rely too much on some physical result of their faith. If I pray about it hard enough, it's going to happen. Well, not if God doesn't want it to happen.
But the passage is confusing. Is the Bible telling us we can do anything we want only if we have enough faith? Remember, the person speaking in the passage is Jesus Christ.
This is a tricky passage because Jesus here is, of course, emphasizing the importance of prayer and the importance of having confidence in God, that God is going to provide all the things that we need.
If you have faith, you can say to this mountain, be removed. And that's the immediate context. And so some people say, so we need to have the same kind of faith that God has. I think a better way to translate that is to have faith in God.
In rabbinic times, it was said that the best rabbis could actually move mountains. That's how great their faith was. And what Jesus is telling his followers is that you already have the faith of the best rabbis. You could move mountains because what was the object of their faith? It was Jesus as the Messiah.
Our God is able to move mountains. And it's He who we need to put our faith in, not in ourselves.
I think Jesus is really using a powerful example to show how when we have faith and trust in the Lord, things are possible that wouldn't be otherwise.
Because you want to know that if you have faith and it's God's will, it's going to happen. But they should have put like a little disclaimer at the bottom, maybe some fine print. But nothing crazy, like God's saying. But relax on the requests, all right? Let's not get out of control. Let's not go throwing mountains into the sea, because that creates a lot of tidal waves.
Counting down the top 5 misused Bible verses of the New Testament. At number 4, Revelation 3:20. Jesus knocks at your heart's door?
Okay, Revelation 3:20 reads this way, Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me.
This verse did also spawn a lot of great paintings and artwork of Jesus at a door doing this. I've seen a lot of them in a lot of churches.
Jesus knocking on the door has become an iconic image for Christians throughout the ages. an image that invokes a warm feeling relating to salvation.
And as a kid, I always liked to think that my heart had a tiny door on it. And I'd say, come on in. But then I thought, well, like if Jesus is coming into my heart, he's tiny. And I thought about Jesus can control his size. Like when you're a kid, you think a lot of crazy stuff when you're getting to know who Jesus is and God is. And now that I have a 4-year-old, we're having the same conversations. So Jesus goes into your heart and he knocks on a door. You don't have a door in your heart. But Jesus is normal sized. He's every size. Just eat your Cheerios.
But does this passage really mean that Jesus is knocking on the door of people's hearts all over the world?
Many people would think that this passage is written to everybody. It's a generic passage, that God is kind of standing outside of all human hearts, kind of knocking, waiting for the door to be opened so that he can come in and commune with them. What we have to appreciate, however, is this passage is actually written to one of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation.
The church written about in Revelation 3 is the church of Laodicea. Jesus is speaking directly to this church, saying, I know your deeds, and calls them wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. And just before Jesus presents the image of standing at the door and knocking, he says, be earnest and repent.
This was a time of deep persecution for many in the church. Maybe in Laodicea, these particular Christians had social stature. Maybe they had some ability to escape the persecution through their riches.
These are people who know about the Christian message. These are people who know about Christianity, but have moved away.
Jesus is warning them, you think you're rich, you think you're safe, but really you're poor and you're blind and you're needy.
He's really calling them to repent. He's calling them to change their mind about who he is. This passage has a very specific context. It's written to one of the specific churches within the book of Revelation itself.
The lesson for Christians today is that we can't just sit back and think that the comforts that we have, the money that we have, are God's blessings to us, and so therefore he's pleased with us. Everything's okay. Rather, we need to see ourselves the way God sees us. We are naked and we are in need of the righteousness of Christ.
Wow. That's interesting because I always thought it was all about evangelism. And whatever secular, heathen, cold-hearted person just asks for me, I'll come in. Which I believe is true, but I guess that verse is not for them. It's a lot more for us. I was also going to say, I think maybe this is the genesis of the very first knock-knock joke. Maybe somebody said, knocking at a door, hey, that's a good way to write about 1,000 jokes. Thanks, God.
Coming up, does the Bible tell Christians they can do anything they want?
I can do everything! Like fly!
We love that verse, but once again, it's interesting. You have to look at the context of what Paul is saying there.
And are Christians supposed to handle snakes?
What this passage means is literally what it said.
It does great physical harm to some people and spiritual harm to almost all that encounter it.
That's crazy.
When Christianity's good, bad, and unholy, Top 5 continues. Our list of the top 5 most misused Bible verses of the New Testament continues. And at number 3 is Philippians 4, verse 13. I can do everything?
Yeah, Philippians 4:13, I can do everything through him who gives me strength.
Yeah. I can do everything! Like fly! And, I don't know, shoot bullets with my fingers.
Does it mean that I can do the impossible because the Lord strengthens me?
That's kind of crazy if somebody's like, I can do all things. I don't know what. I can be president, like not everybody can.
Well, I think sometimes people misuse this verse as kind of an endorsement for anything I set out to do, God has promised to give me the strength to do that. And then, of course, they take that maybe even further to say that I will succeed.
I do like this verse. It was the first verse I ever memorized as a kid. That was my first memory verse. I think I was maybe in 3rd grade, and it's still like one of my favorite verses. Because when I get down, when I'm running down, I can do all things. It just encourages me to just do the thing I'm doing right now that I don't think I can do. Oh, God reminds me I can do all things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great verse, and a lot of people, we love that verse, but once again, it's interesting, you have to look at the context of what Paul is saying there.
Just before Paul claims to be able to do all things, Paul talks about how I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances. This context shows us that the all things Paul talks about refers to being content in every situation. So a better interpretation might read, I can be content in all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Paul experienced a lot of difficulties. I mean, he's in prison. And so certainly Paul is not saying, I can do anything. He's specifically referring to that God gives him the strength to be content in any situation.
It's not a verse of triumphalism that I will conquer everything and I will win. It's that I will accept in humility whatever the situation is that God puts before me. The two couldn't be more different from each other.
We have to be careful that we don't read more in there than is necessary. And that's a very important principle of interpretation. I want to lead out the meaning of the text. I want to know what the author intended. That's called exegesis. I want to lead out what John's meaning was or what Paul's meaning was. Eisegesis is the troubling aspect where we read into it our own personal meaning or the meaning in our contemporary context. We want to stay away from that.
This is almost not top 5 misquoted verses, but top 5 misused verses. It's like people get a hold of these things and they run out and misuse them. Like they haven't read the instructions. You put the pieces together wrong and you're going to hurt yourself.
We're nearing the end of our list of the top 5 most misused Bible verses of the New Testament. At number 2, we have Mark 16, verse 18. Picking up snakes and drinking poison?
And these signs will accompany those who believe. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all.
Well, I hope that scripture doesn't inspire people to go out and drink poison, or handle snakes, or handle poisonous snakes, or cause snakes to drink poison. We don't want to do that either. There's a lot of crazy snakes and poison stuff in the middle of that is kind of scary, quite frankly.
Many people have said that what this passage means is literally what it said, that because people believe in Jesus Christ, they'll be able to pick up snakes, and there have been snake-handling churches. They're demonstrating how powerful their faith is because these snakes won't bite them, or they would actually drink poison, or they would be able to heal any illness.
This practice has very little, if any, biblical support. It does great physical harm to some people and spiritual harm to almost all that encounter it.
I mean, we should be able to have the faith to go out and do great things, but I don't know. Maybe I don't have the faith to pick up the next snake I see when I'm hiking. I don't do a lot of getting near snakes. I think if I hear a snake, I'm pretty much running and not quoting that verse.
The problem with this passage is that this belongs to the long reading to the end of the Gospel of Mark. And the earliest manuscripts in Mark 16 at verse 8, they don't include verse 9 and following.
Most of the early manuscripts end the Gospel at verse 8. This has led scholars to speculate that the original ending of Mark was lost and has cast doubt on the validity of the longer ending.
What we're reading here about handling snakes and drinking poison is probably an alternative ending that was added to the text. So it's likely that there was another ending to Mark that's been lost, but what was written by Mark, as far as we're concerned, would end in verse 8.
if this was a critical command for Christians to obey, we would expect to see other examples, other commands stated elsewhere in the Bible that we could kind of build up a whole understanding, a whole teaching about it. But we don't see that.
Most of the time, when it comes to the New Testament, principles about Christian belief and life are repeated in various places.
Even if this is authentic, even if this is part of the original Gospel of Mark, it seems to me that's best understood as a prophetic description of what is to follow.
Even if Mark wrote about picking up snakes or eating poison, this passage seems to be foreshadowing of future events. For example, in Acts chapter 28, we read about how Paul had no ill effects after being bitten by a poisonous viper. These are events foreshadowed by Mark 16, and not to be taken as rules for Christians to live by.
It should not be taken as a promise or, that this is what we ought to do. In fact, especially with the whole snake handling thing. But yet, as Jesus said, don't test God.
So it's best to err on the side of caution to say, whatever this means, it's probably of a lesser importance and possibly not even in the original document.
But yeah, I don't attend a church that picks up snakes. I'll go out on a limb and say that. Makes me nervous.
Coming up, we reveal the number one most misused Bible verse of the New Testament.
And this is the verse that everybody seems to know, even people who know absolutely nothing about the Bible.
But I guess some people use that verse to say, we shouldn't put any of our standards out to anyone and tolerate everything. Because everything's cool now, right?
When Christianity's good, bad, and unholy Top 5 continues. We've been counting down the top 5 most misused Bible verses of the New Testament. Before we reveal the top Bible verse, let's recap our list. At number 5, we had Mark 11, verse 22, throwing a mountain into the sea.
I think Jesus is really using a powerful example to show how when we have faith and trust in the Lord, things are possible that wouldn't be otherwise.
At number 4, we had Revelation 3, verse 20. Jesus knocks at your heart's door.
I guess that verse is not for them. It's a lot more for us, Christian people who forget that He's right outside our heart.
At number 3, we had Philippians 4, verse 13. I can do all things?
He's not saying all things in this kind of unqualified, generic sense of, that I can do anything. Because as we all know, only God can do all things.
At number 2, we have Mark 16, verse 18. Picking up snakes and drinking poison?
So it's best to err on the side of caution to say, whatever this means, it's probably of a lesser importance and possibly not even in the original document.
And now the number 1 most misused Bible verse in the New Testament, Matthew 7, verse 1. Don't judge anyone?
Matthew 7:1, do not judge or you too will be judged. I think that is maybe the most often misunderstood passage in the New Testament.
Yeah, and I grew up knowing the judge not lest you be judged. I don't think people use the word lest enough.
And it used to be the passage that everybody knew was John 3:16. I think today, often the passage that is quoted is, judge not, lest you too be judged.
And this is the verse that everybody seems to know, even people who know absolutely nothing about the Bible. And they take it as they use it as kind of a statement to prohibit making moral judgments.
So don't judge people. Yeah, that's a good thing. But I guess some people use that verse to say, hey, we shouldn't judge anybody. We shouldn't put any of our standards out to anyone and tolerate everything. Because everything's cool now, right?
They're really meaning that we cannot evaluate. We cannot make moral judgments. We cannot make theological judgments. We can't make political judgments.
What they do is they want to say, this is kind of a prohibition against making moral judgments, so I can do whatever I want and you shouldn't judge me for it.
And this attitude of not wanting to judge people, even being told not to judge people is very attractive in our culture because we live in a world that is very relativistic. People want to determine their own morality.
And of course, that's very contrary to what Jesus said and taught during his earthly ministry. It's very inconsistent with what we see in the Gospels.
It's easy to make the mistake that Jesus is saying, don't judge anyone. But the question is, if that's not what Jesus meant, what did he mean?
The first thing we need to understand about this verse is that whatever it means, it can't mean that we can't judge anything, because there are too many other places in the Bible where we're actually commanded to judge.
It tells us in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, test all things, hold on to the good.
We're commanded to show discernment about true and false prophets. We're commanded to show discernment about true and false teachers. So whatever Matthew 7:1 means, it doesn't mean that we can never judge. We have to judge. We're commanded to judge. The question is what is it specifically that we are not to judge in Matthew 7:1?
What the passage really means in context is don't judge rashly. Don't judge hypocritically or impulsively.
We need to judge ourselves first. We don't want to be hypocritical. In other words, we don't want to tell someone don't do this or do this when we ourselves are not living by the same standard.
So he's not prohibiting judgments. He's just saying, apply the same standards of judgment to yourself as you apply to others.
And I think a lot of Christians, we get out there and judge a lot. I know some super judgers. Some judgy McJudgersteins that need to just like pull back on the throttle.
Nothing wrong with forming judgments about things, but don't do it impulsively, don't do it hypocritically, don't do it rashly.
You judge meister.
Thank you for watching Christianity's Good, Bad, and Unholy Top 5. We hope you enjoyed this program. If you'd like to learn more about the subjects we talked about here, please visit our website at www.christiantop5.com. There you can download free in-depth study guides, view outtakes, bonus features, and preview other shows. Join us next time as we explore Christianity's Good, Bad, and Unholy Top 5. Remember, Christians are imperfect people, that's why we need God.